Murray is here, a branding and marketing executive from Wordsearch in London. And we're going to discuss something that we've never had a chance to talk about in all of these tall building congresses, and that is marketing and branding tall buildings. How is that done? What's the basic science behind marketing a tall building?
I think the important thing for me is to realize that there's something that's specific and important about every building. We specialize only in buildings and architecture. And I think that often it's easy to forget that these are the most complex products on earth. You know, they're millions of parts, billions of pounds, thousands of workers. They represent success or failure for innumerable businesses, and ultimately they are the place in which businesses will rise or fall and will earn and employ thousands of people and millions of pounds. And they're not shampoo. You know, it's not like selling cereal. It's having to understand that these are machines for working, they're machines for living, and using all of the tools that are available to be able to express that complexity and that importance within branding and marketing material that isn't non-specific. You know, that's serious, that's intelligent, that's logical, and that understands what it is about those buildings which make them important. And every single building goes through a very long and complex process of design and development, and has an intent which needs to be expressed within the marketing material. Because at the end of the day, we're making tools for people to sell space. It's about getting people into buildings where they work or where they live or where they shop, and providing the tools that allow people to sell that idea, to be able to communicate that concept to people, is critical. So at a very detailed level, it's about delivering plans that are legible. It's about being able to express specification in a way that people can read, and also to people that don't necessarily know anything about building. But I think the bigger picture beyond that is understanding that tall buildings are unlike any other buildings. They express intent and ambition. They say something about the cities that they're in. They say something about the cities that build them. And being able to understand what it is about that particular structure in that particular place at that particular time, and express it in a way that is intelligent, logical, compelling, and usable and saleable is key to what we do.
Well, you certainly have the client list here, because the buildings that you have worked on include Taipei 101 and Shanghai Tower, which is going up across the street, One World Trade Center in New York, which is the replacement building for the Twin Towers, one of them. That's quite a roster. What are some of the other projects that come to mind?
Well, we work a lot in the City of London, and we have, I've worked for the last 10 years on the Shard, which is now the tallest building in Europe, and a beautiful building that's just completed, working on the Gherkin, and we've worked on a number of 122 Leadenhall, Richard Rogers in the City of London, as well as a number of buildings by KPF, including ICC in Hong Kong, the third tallest building in the world, and we're working currently in Guangzhou on the K11 office building, which will be the sixth tallest building in the world. So tall buildings is definitely a passion for us, and I think that one of the reasons why we work on a lot of tall buildings is because they require specific skills. As I sort of said before, they're very complex, and they need to be talked about by people that understand them. And I think particularly when you look at London has been a very interesting experience for me recently, because, as I say, I worked on the Shard for the last 10 years. London is a place where very recently there have been a lot of tall buildings, either in planning or construction, and it's only now that they're starting to be completed or to really affect the skyline. And seeing the way in which the public have taken a building like the Shard to their heart is really extraordinary. And I think, for one, it's a very, very beautiful building.
Well, one of the things you said that really surprised me is that a lot of people, from a marketing standpoint, didn't know the Shard was there, didn't realize.
Well, I think that we live in a little bubble in this sort of specialised world of construction and architecture and design and development, assuming that everybody knows what we know, and that because somebody is building the tallest building in the world, everybody around must know about it. But I think one of the things that developers sometimes fall short of is appreciating the impact that tall buildings have in the wider world, and not using their marketing budgets to talk to that wide audience, because at the end of the day, tall buildings are owned by everybody. You know, they're owned by the city in which they operate, not just by the developer or the tenant. And being able to excite cities about the buildings that are going there, I think, are absolutely key. And again, you know, it's very interesting in London that the way in which the press have responded to the Shard is different to the way that people have responded to it. And actually, people take buildings like that are given to them. I mean, I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that an iconic building, a beautiful structure, that was really the vision and the drive of one man, Irvine Seller, has been given to his city. You know, it's been given to the people of the city and said, you know, this is this beautiful object that I built on the skyline. And there is a big disconnect between the operation and function of a building and what goes on inside it, and the impact that it has on the skyline and what it says about that city. And it moves that city forward for generations in terms of its outward appearance and the way that it's viewed around the world. And I think that London is a particularly good example of a place that has been brought forward in the eyes of the world in terms of its modernity and complexity by the quality of the tall buildings that are going up there.
Well, I think it's been very well done, considering the kind of city that London is, and what has gone up there certainly seems consistent. There's nothing really out of line there.
Well, I think London is a particularly interesting model because it's dealing with a medieval city plan. So we're just working on a new tall building for W.R. Berkeley by KPF in the city, and the site itself was in the same place, has been in the same place for the last 500 years. So that has defined the site plan. That has defined the shape that the building must occupy. And then take into account the fact that from Fleet Street you have a protected view of St Paul's, which means that the envelope of the building can't go through that view. And suddenly you get a whole series of constraints, site constraints, which push the architecture in a particular direction. And then on top of that, you add the fact that that building will now compete with the Gherkin, the Shard, 20 Fenchurch Street by Raphael Vanoli, 122 Leadenhall by Richard Rogers, the Heron Tower by KPF, and the Pinnacle by KPF, and you're suddenly now in a very, very competitive environment of iconic buildings. And so these buildings have to work incredibly hard to stand out, to be better, to work, to be accepted by the planning authority. And as a result, I think those obstacles deliver very, very extraordinary and very, very high quality buildings.
Well, keeping that example in mind, I'll present you with a hypothetical right here in Shanghai, because we have three super talls standing together. We've got Jin Mao, the Shanghai World Financial Center, and the Shanghai Tower. So if you were presented with marketing all three of these buildings, how do you differentiate between them, or how do you sell each one individually?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I normally take more time to work that out than
in 1,000 words or less.
I think that what stands out for me, if in a very snapshot glance, is the outside style of the design. I think Shanghai Tower is a building which is anthropomorphic in nature, in shape. It delivers vertical sky gardens. It delivers villages and meeting points, and I think it represents an idealized view of the vertical community. And I think it talks about collectivism, and I think it talks about the will of a people driving this building forward. And I think it represents Shanghai. I think it's really interesting that it's called the Shanghai Tower, because I think it represents the will of the people. And I think that these three buildings together represent Shanghai's growing dominance and importance. And these buildings are not just about delivering office space. There's a lot of office space in Shanghai. It needs it, but there's a lot of space. It's about a statement of intent, a statement of ambition. And I think that the Shanghai Financial Center, I think that it's an altogether different sort of style and shape of building. And I think that at its time, it represented sort of the new gleaming future. It was, angular and slick and metal looking in appearance. And coupled with this very anthropomorphic Shanghai Tower, I think it represents a different point in the development of the city. And then with the Jin Mao, again, this, with a very Asian-focused design, but by an American firm, it brought this sort of international relation, Chinese-American architecture to space, and it started to give a very international feel to Pudong. So I think that what you've got around these little three buildings is this that marks the change of Pudong, the change of Shanghai, the growth of the Chinese nation in these three extraordinary buildings as they come out of the ground, and each one going higher. It's not just I have to be higher than the next. It is a growth upwards, it's a growth forwards. And it's one of the most exciting things about tall buildings is that they represent human characteristics in a way that other buildings don't.
In the time we have left, I'm just going to ask one more question because there are so many people out there, marketing people who would, I'm sure, love to be doing what you're doing. Is there a special skill set that goes along with marketing tall buildings? If somebody wanted to do that, what do they work on and how do they do it? Because it's different than marketing condos, unless they're 1,000 feet in the air.
Yes, I'd say my background is buildings, and I think for me that's the thing. I think that it's about loving the buildings and understanding the buildings, and I want to be involved in buildings more than anything else. And so I think when it comes to understanding and selling and branding and communicating and talking about them, it's the building that comes first, and I think that's the important thing. As I said, to you before, this is not like selling shampoo. It's not just branding. The branding is sort of secondary to the building part, and I think that's probably what I'd say. It's about appreciating. We deal with a range of audiences, some of whom are absolute experts. And you have to look around this conference. This is the world's biggest collection of building geeks. And they know what they're talking about, and they appreciate, love, and understand. I had a very long conversation last night with a gentleman I'd met about steel welding and steel girders within tall buildings. And then the other half of our audience have never seen a plan in their life. They can't tell the difference between a plan, a section, and an elevation, and they don't understand what buildings do. And you have to educate them. You have to do it with the same set of tools. So I think being able to bridge that gap is the key and the critical element. And I have to say, for me, the biggest thing is about enthusiasm and passion.
This is fun. We've never talked about this before. And William Murray from Wordsearch in London, thanks for coming to see us in Shanghai.
Thanks for inviting me.